Maggie, can you go ahead and share your screen? So welcome to UCGIS Week, Day 2. My name is Amy Work, and I am your moderator, and we have a wonderful series lined up today. Maggie is our helper. We have a wonderful series today titled Environmental Management and Cultural Geography Lightning Talks. So we have a series of 5 guest speakers today who will talk about this. You'll see sort of some information on the slide if you would like to. We have our website where you can get more information about the schedule and the talks and see everything. We also do have a code of conduct that will ask everyone to follow of respect for one another and respect to our speakers today. So thank you very much. And we'll post a survey at the end. But if you have any questions, please post them in the channel. What we will do today is we will go through our speakers and we will hold all questions until the end. So welcome to day 2 of UCGIS Week. I'm excited for these talks. So Janie and Leo will go ahead and hand it off to both of you to get us started. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Amy. I'm going to share my screen. Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Jingyi Huang. And today, happy GIS Day for first. And today I was going to present about scaling up the drone-based 3D mapping for campus facility management. And yes, my name is Jingyi Huang. I'm a GIS analyst from UC San Diego from the OMCP department. And I have my co-presenter, Leo, here with me.
Hello, I'm Leo. I'm a USP Urban Study and Planning major alumni, and I'm glad to work on this project along with Ching.
Thank you, Leo. Some of you may be already quite familiar with this topic because we do a presentation last year as well. But the reason why for us to present this again is because we have some change since last year. First of all, we're growing the team, which we had only one licensed pilot last year. But this year, we have Leo as a alumni and volunteer for this project joining us. And also we have Anna, my teammates, and also we have Julia now is a very experienced observer for the drum pilot project here. And we also expand our coverage from only the North Torrey Pine Living and Learning neighborhood to cover the majority of the La Jolla main campus. The next change that we had to make since the last presentation is now we enable the RTK on both our drones and also the ground control point collection, so we have the more accurate location for our 3D models. Last but not least, now we finally have our 3D campus model delivered for people to explore our campus. At the same time, we do encounter some challenges, and Leo will be the presenter share this part.
Okay, so I will briefly go over some key challenges and solution. So one of the first challenges is a scheduled flight operation across different area of campus. Like we need a facility management for rooftop access, or when we need to fly UCSD Health campus, we need to face the challenges with the presence of medical helicopters and also ATC air traffic control. So to address that, we need to coordinate with different departments to minimize a disruption and ensure safety at the same time. So for example, when we do UCSD Health, we need to have prior coordination with approval to ensure that we do not encounter or interfere any emergency flight or hospital operations. We also encouraging UC UAS for feedback and collaborations for meeting all the university and FAA requirements. The second challenges that we have is the stable RTK connections. So when we often have signal loss every time we fly near the tall building or dense trees. Or whatever we want to use a base station that is unstable. So to mitigate this, we want to have a consistent and stable RTK reference spaces, and also going to do it in a wide open space wherever possible, so that we can have the most stable connection there. Another challenges is to the offset and misalignment between 3D models generated from different paths. So it can occur because there may be some slightly differences for RTK data, or there will be some overlapping condition. To address that, we have ground control points to align and merge all model into a consistent coordinate system for higher spatial accuracy.
And after we overcome those challenges, we have our 3D campus model ready. We have been using this for different scenarios. I'd like to share some with you during these presentations. So this language guide bring us to the 3D drone mappings for the UC San Diego. The building that is showing up here is the latest residential areas for our UC San Diego, which is called the Richward North Living Learning Neighborhoods. Because it's a new neighborhood, the new area of the campus, this 3D model is not available in Google Earth or near map yet. So because we are from the campus and we host the data locally, and we have more flexibility to schedule the flights and work on this data. So by having this model ready, not only the students, but also the facility management team can check this model and see how's the building constructed and what is the environment around these areas. And also we have another newer area called the amphitheater. Okay, the theater area, which is also a new residential area for our campus. You can see, kind of seeing that from this tall building here, you can see through the ocean. It's a very good view from our residential areas here. And also, we not only can use this for just checking the environment on campus, we can also use this for different scenario. For example, here saying that for the field work, we're doing the virtual field work, we can also do the 3D wayfinding. We provide some example for the virtual field work here. Like by using this 3D geomapping, student can check those filing location of the filing in this map pretty easily instead of going out in the field in sun or under the rains. And so they will save them some time for doing the physical field trip, but doing those virtually on the map here. Another way that we found is pretty helpful is amphitheater is another popular spot on our campus currently. There have farmers market and we have like the dance show, the music show happening in the amphitheater. So by using this mapping, we know that after they arrive to San Diego by the trolley, they can just walking distance to the amphitheater here. And if they purchase a ticket for a show, they want to know how's the view from the show, they can also use this model and get closer and see, oh, okay, I will probably sit in the center to enjoy the show there. And we also share this mapping to our campus planning and development team, and they show interest of using this to plan the next building on the campus.
So now we are combining different 3D meshes into one single meshes for unifying 3D campus model and eliminating gaps and overlaps. Right now, we want to have we are trying to improve the performance now for fast loading and optimizing the storage to be more efficiently and allow smoother visualization, especially when the model is used on a website and also from the mobile devices. Another major pieces that we are doing is street views integration. We collect and use 2D and 360 street view imagery that give us a detailed ground level perspective for the supplement of the aerial 3D data. But in the future, we will be able to add more accurate street level mapping, virtual walkthrough, and better content for planner and facility teams. We would like to extend our appreciation to many departments, labs, and collaborators who has been collaborating with us, providing us with essential resources, generously share the expertise throughout this project. Your support and knowledge makes this success possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny and Leo. Wonderful presentation. And so for those who've just joined, feel free to use the chat to ask your questions in the chat. We'll hold off until the end for all questions for our presenters. But up next, we have Malia. Malia, go ahead and share your screen. We can see it, but I think you are still on mute.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Malia Reese, and I am a staff research associate at Scripps Institution of Oceanography at UC San Diego. And I'm going to be presenting a data set called Global Coastal Fatal Landslides and Cliff Failures, which is about to be submitted to Natural Hazards and Earth System Sciences. And then this work is with Dr. Adam Young and Dr. Jessica Carrilli. Let me try to play this video. Okay, so this is a video from Cornwall in the UK where a large chunk of cliff suddenly fell. Cliff collapses are like this. They're very sudden and unexpected on the beach, and someone could have been unsuspecting right underneath it. And a lot of people actually are underneath these cliffs when they fall, and it's pretty tragic. These people are often just walking their dog or tanning or spending time with their friends and family at the beach. And this happens quite a lot, but hopefully this data set can help inform management decisions to mitigate this. And so far, there have been many data sets on global fatal landslides, not just coastal, but this is the first one specifying coastal hazards. And so I compiled a database of death via rockfall on cliffs and beaches. This database was compiled using news and media searches in English and other languages, but we also used a lot of regional, national, and global data sets for all landslides in general. Many of these databases were on GIS platforms, and if the data wasn't able to be directly downloaded, then they're manually scrolled on the ArcGIS web maps, and then if accessible, downloaded, and then on GIS here, filtered by proximity to the coastline, and then manually parsed through to see if it fit with our data set. And in total, we recorded 114 individual fatal coastal landslide events from 1927 to 2024, totaling 292 fatalities. And these are categorized as cliff falls or rock falls that kill people on beaches. In total, the places with the most events happened in the US and then in the UK, France, and Spain. Spain had our highest number of fatal events, but this was partially because of a data set that we had access to that was pre-internet. And hopefully we can access more of these data sets over time. And then the US had both a high number of landslide events and fatalities, and these were primarily concentrated in San Diego, with 76% of fatalities and 67% of US events happening here. So this was our biggest hotspot, tied with France. And then for France's events, this wasn't on the main country area. That's actually on the small island of Reunion, right next to Madagascar, with around 80% of events happening there. And then looking deeper with events and fatalities by time, with our fatal events in blue and then fatalities in red, they do increase over time, but we also think this is from increased media reporting with internet access and our lack of access to older data sets. And then by month, the number of events and deaths follow pretty much a bimodal pattern, with more events happening in July and August in this peak right here, and January and February. So we thought this was pretty interesting. So what's up with these two peaks? So then we split by hemisphere, and then when separated by hemisphere, interestingly, most fatal landslide events are happening in the summer months of each hemisphere, so July and August in the northern hemisphere, and then January, February, December in the southern hemisphere. And so this is happening in summer. So is this happening because there's more rainfall? So on a seasonal basis, we might expect rainfall to have more of a role because it's cited for all landslides, not just coastal landslides, that rainfall is the dominant driver of landslides. However, for our coastal fatal landslide data set, it did not show a strong relationship to rainfall at all, with about R squared of 0.05. And even though a lot of the articles that we found cited rainfall as the reason for the landslide. So why was there such a lack of power, and why is there still such strong seasonality in our data set? So we analyzed several factors with the events. This is all per country, so each blue dot is a country. And so on our top row, we have more abiotic factors like per country cliff percentage, per country coastline length, and cliff length. And surprisingly, there was not a relationship here. We see like pretty much across the board, not really something there. But then when we look on the bottom on our more human-related factors like per country tourism, population, and GDP, there's much more of a relationship. And so obviously here that it's more to do with the human aspect of cliff falls, and so tourism was especially surprising to us. And then looking deeper at the media articles that we found, um, if there was an identified person, we designated if they were a local or a tourist, and that they were impacted about equally, with about 66 locals and 69 tourists killed. And then looking smaller at San Diego, we tried to just look smaller to see about this pattern. And San Diego was a primary hotspot for our global data set, with event peaks in July and August, and January and February, which also matches the pattern in the Northern Hemisphere. And then to analyze tourism, we used airport passengers arriving in San Diego International Airport, with this pink line right here peaking in the summer, which aligns with our summer peak in fatal events, and then rainfall peaks in January and February, which aligns with this peak here. So tourism and rainfall are lining up with these peaks. We do caution analysis in this data set because there's only 10 events happening in San Diego and 19 fatalities. So take it with a grain of salt. But it is still an interesting analysis that we hope applies to other countries and cities as well. And so these peaks might be from rainfall and tourism, because tourism is more likely to happen in dry, warm months versus the rainy season. And this might be the reason why rainfall is lacking power in our entire data set, because it's directly balanced out by that human aspect. And so some takeaways: the likelihood of fatal coastal landslides not only increases with rainfall, but also with beach use, and this can inform management decisions. This tends to make sense because there's like more people, more deaths are going to happen. But this also really differs from our analysis of inland landslides, where landslides mostly occur in developing countries with pretty low GDP and high rainfall, where here in our coastal data set, they're happening in these more wealthy, temperate regions with high tourism. And so various methods to reduce these landslide hazards have included things like sand nourishments, seawalls, forecasting with LiDAR to see if certain rocks are going to fall at certain times, education, signage, blocking off beaches directly, lifeguard training, and then emergency response. But if both locals and tourists are impacted by cliffs, these management actions should cater towards these demographics. And people who live in coastal areas are way more likely to be aware of these hazards than tourists, but still, they're often not aware, and these things still do happen to locals. So this data set can hopefully inform decisions about how to manage these areas. And hopefully the map will be available on an ArcGIS platform as well. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Malia, for a wonderful presentation. So again, ask your questions in the chat, or feel free to wait till the end, and you can also raise your hand and speak out that way. So next up, we have Azure. Azure, do you want to go ahead and share your screen and take it away?
Yes. All right. Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Audrey Fisher of UC Riverside, the Department of Environmental Sciences, and today I'm going to be sharing my ongoing research project of modeling to assess the impacts of warehouse intensification on neighborhood air quality exposure in Southern California's Inland Empire. So Los Angeles has met capacity for housing goods during the new millennium. With the rise of e-commerce, especially the popularity of Amazon, we have met capacity for our ability to house goods in Los Angeles. The Port of Long Beach brings in about 40% of all US goods. And so it's convenient to have these warehouses located in Los Angeles due to decreased truck travel time and therefore decreased emissions. But because of the dense urbanness of Los Angeles, this expansion has taken place in the Inland Empire, primarily in the area highlighted within that box, which is the Ontario and Eastville area that's experienced a rapid land use change. So in 2010, you can see here in the left side that it's the land use in the center of the subdomain is dominated by crops and specifically agricultural land use covers. And in 2024, that has been shifted to be dominated by the developed land use areas. And we can see that developed of a medium intensity has increased by the highest margin, which is going to be primarily make up of the residential area. So residential area has expanded, and therefore the amount of people that can be exposed to, as well as the amount of passenger vehicles that are going to be on road. And the greatest loss was cultivated crops. Developed of a high intensity is almost exclusively going to be making up these warehouses that you can see in the GIF on the right. And when we think of the amount of trucks that are going to be entering the area by the hundreds of thousands on a daily basis, we can see that there's going to be an air quality issue or an increase in air quality exposure due to this transition. But as of right now, we don't have the high spatial resolution data in order to understand that dynamic. And so because we lack this ability to go back into the past and monitor the amount of emissions and that are associated with different land covers and the amount of money that it takes to just have those monitors, we can do some modeling, specifically some statistical modeling. And modeling allows us to isolate these features and understand their statistical relationships with air quality. And we're going to be using nitrogen dioxide, NO2, in order to understand these dynamics because it has a very short lifespan. So it can reflect the local anthropogenic activity that's occurring, and as well as its association with combustion. It's going to be very highly associated with traffic, as that is one of the primary or the main emitter when it comes to warehousing and the exposure change in the area due to the land use change. And so to get to our actual research question of how does warehouse intensification and individual land use impact NO2 concentrations across an area experiencing rapid land use change? As our modeling question, we're going to be using a GAM-based land use regression equation in order to understand this. It's going to be factored by year, and we have various meteorological and land use predictor variables that are going to inform the model in order to make these predictions accurately. We have a main domain, which is everything within the Los Angeles basin and a little bit above within the blue area is going to be informing the model. And we're simply going to be cropping it to our area of interest, which is that Eastville area that we discussed that is experiencing this rapid land use change. And there's a lot of different variety of land use or land cover within this domain to inform. And so a lot of data processing took place on ArcGIS, where the actual code and model was ran on RStudio. The data inputs that we used in order to gain this high spatial resolution data was of the Tropomi satellite. We used NO2 column data at a 3.5 times 7 kilometer resolution. This was a summer model, so it's data from June to August, and Tropomi goes over the area of interest at about 1:30 p.m., so all variables are within this time frame, available from 2018 to 2024 data. We used annual NLCD data to inform of the land cover data and meteorological data, specifically solar radiation and maximum temperature, were used from DAMET's satellite. And air mod dispersion output was also incorporated into the model to achieve hybrid modeling. And this air mod dispersion was specifically to incorporate the dispersion coming from roads into other areas of the subdomain. And this was all interpolated into a 1x1 kilometer grid with a 2 kilometer buffer of the centroid when assessing land use variables, so that there is a representation of a gradient of NO2 between grid cells. And so above in the interpolated Tropomi NO2 data, you can see the observational data in comparison to the below predicted model data. And although there is some underestimation as seen in the center of the subdomain in 2024, we can see that temporally and spatially it is representative of the observational data. Here we can see the partial effects of the model and how they are representative of assessing the individual land uses alone and how they're going to say, oh, if developed high intensity land use is higher, it's going to likely lead to increases in NO2. And these are the main dominant land cover data of the subdomain. And you can see that pasture is not reflective of these other patterns. And that is an issue of right now within the model. But in these scenarios, we took away various land uses that are agriculture variables in order to see the modeled contribution of these variables towards NO2 concentrations to see where spatially they are going to increase or decrease their effective NO2. So when we remove grasslands individually, when we remove cropland, we can see that NO2 is going to increase because these variables are not associated with high NO2 concentrations. However, is the issue with the partial effective pastures, we can see that when partial effects is removed, the delta leads towards the it's not representative of other agricultural variables. So it's going to be leading towards decreases in NO2, which is not an accurate representation of pastures within the model. And this is because there is just not a lot of pastures within the actual full domain. And when they do exist in the full domain, they tend to be next to anthropogenic activity. So this is something that needs to be regulated within the model in order to have a better representation. However, when actually running some of the warehouse scenarios, such as this scenario where warehouse growth is predicted or it stops in 2018, whereas the majority of this warehousing was developed post 2013. When we halt both land use and warehouse development in 2018, we can see that there is a decrease in NO2 emissions over the Eastville neighborhood area. There is an increase in the central agricultural point, but this is due to that issue with pasture's partial effects. But when we change pasture and convert it into a different land use, such as cultivated crops, we can see that with just the decrease in 2018 warehouses and a halt in land cover change of the high developed land use development, we can see that Ontario, Eastville, Chino, and Chino Hills all experience decreases in predicted NO2. And this can be represent some of what just these few warehouses are contributing towards those areas NO2 wise and concentration. So we've predicted how much post 2018 warehouse activity may contribute towards 2024 NO2 concentrations and exposure. And so for our next steps, we need to identify how to regulate the dominance of pastures within the model. We're going to be running scenarios using previous years of land use data, such as 2004 and 2010, that existed pre-Tripomi data availability, so that we can have high spatial resolution predictions. And we're also going to be modeling the relationships that warehouse developments have with other subsections of the domain, such as Muna Valley, where these land cover changes are also occurring at a high rate. All right, thank you. Here, my email is at the bottom if anyone has any questions for me.
Thank you, Azur. And yes, you can put that as well, put your email if you would like in your chat as well, and we can take questions at the end, but fascinating. And thank you for that presentation. So next up, we have Jacob and Jordan, and I believe one of you can go ahead and share your screen.
Hello, good morning. Jordan, are you also on? Hi, so we can get started here.
Hello. I will pull up my screen here. My name is Jordan. I am a communications fellow with the UC Institute of Transportation Studies. And let me just get oriented to the screen. So I will pass it over to Jacob to kick us off.
Great, thank you. And I'm Jacob Wasserman. I'm Research Program Manager with the UCLA Institute of Transportation Studies. We do what it says on the tin. We study the big issues in transportation. And we're going to be presenting on an exciting project we've been doing for about 4 years now, on freeway history and freeway siting in California. So if you're unfamiliar, the interstate highway system started in earnest in the 1950s under the Eisenhower administration. It built, the big interstates across the country, but it also built interstates into cities, and those were quite destructive often. They were often used as vehicles, no pun intended, for slum clearance, for dividing neighborhoods of color or redeveloping them. And the effects were, as we will see, quite racially discriminate. And so we were tasked by Caltrans to the State Department of Transportation to look at different sites across California. The exciting part about this study is we got to also look at suburbs and smaller cities which traditionally have not been the focus of kind of this historical freeway research. And one of the sites that we're going to preview, which we did our GIS online story map for, is Colton, which is a suburb of San Bernardino in the Inland Empire. And I'll turn it over to Jordan to show you through the story map.
All right. So this is our story map for the Colton case study. And as I go through the story map, I'll be kind of flip-flopping between the research narrative and some specific features and components of the story map that we would like to highlight today. So as Jacob mentioned, for those of you who are not familiar, Colton is a relatively small city about 60 miles east of downtown Los Angeles and has really been situated in the center of a national and later international logistics hub since its establishment in the late 18th century as a major railroad junction, which really went hand in hand with the agriculture and citrus industry in Southern California that was really booming around that time. So while those industries were really key in creating rare opportunities, housing and employment-wise for communities of color in Colton, they also have been major sources of exclusion, both physically and socioeconomically. So we'll specifically be looking at the role of the railroad and then later the construction of the Interstate 10 in dividing the city. But for starters here, we have a guided map tour to orient the viewer to the transportation landscape in Colton. And you can see in this aerial imagery here, really the imposing presence of the highway, the railroad, and the warehouses and logistics industry. And we have a couple key points that highlight how restrictive this infrastructure was, both racially and socioeconomically in Colton, some historical pinch points that made it near impossible to travel between North and South Colton, which had major racial implications as South Colton was predominantly a community of color, which Jacob can get into a bit more with this interactive map that we have here.
So this is a map based on 1950 census data. So our team did a lot of work taking PDF census data and digitizing it and going block by block and mapping the demographics of Colton before the freeway. And you can see this is, as Jordan said, this is just extreme segregation. So if you click on any of these blocks here, yeah, 100%, literally every single person the census went to in that block in South Colton was Latino, whereas to the north, you know, let's see what that one is. Does that say? Yeah, like under 10%. And so the tracks were already a stark barrier, and the freeway, as you can see, complemented that. So if you'll scroll down, we also were able to look at some data beyond just demographics. So these are the median annual earnings. This is in 1950 dollars. But you can see the huge disparity. Latino residents were earning about half what white residents were, and then that maps very neatly onto North versus South Colton.
So this next section, we really wanted to highlight the lived experiences and vibrant culture and self-sustaining community that early South Colton residents were able to establish in the face of this extreme segregation. So you can see we really use this pull quote feature here to both figuratively and literally center the community voices that were involved in the research process. So we also pulled some archival photos to highlight the cultural traditions and celebrations, and even a vibrant commercial corridor that they were able to establish, again, despite some extreme exclusion from the rest of the city. We also have a link to a oral history project here from Cal State University, San Bernardino that I really encourage you to check out. So we wanted to feature that again here to really highlight the lived experiences of South Colton residents and the impacts that the freeway and railroad and transportation infrastructure really had in shaping their lived experiences. So that really set the stage for this next section, which gets into the decision-making process by the California Highway Commission, which was the precursor to Caltrans. So the decision-making process took nearly a decade and was really shaped by fierce public debate. So what we wanted to do is use the sidecar feature here to really tease out each route and the implications that each route would have for residents and businesses, and also the stakeholders that were involved in either supporting or opposing the various routes. So I'll just kind of scroll through these here. And the route that was ultimately selected was this one in green that runs parallel to the railroad tracks that was ultimately the least destructive in terms of displacement to residents and businesses, as Jacob will showcase through this quantitative research that the research team conducted. But while it was technically the least destructive, still had much broader implications that still persist today, as I'll kind of close out with. But for now, I'll pass it to Jacob to go through these graphs.
Yeah, so the exciting part here is we were able to map out the alternate routes that Jordan showed, and basically the way that that was done is we got paper maps, PDF maps from Caltrans of the right of way of what was actually built, and then we said, well, if that width you took that and you put that on the other routes that were proposed on different parts of town that were ultimately rejected, what would the displacement have been? And that's kind of something I haven't seen in other studies, and so we were able to compare. Colton, the freeway's a little too old. The census data weren't detailed enough to do all that we wanted to. In some of our other case studies, we were really able to get into the nitty-gritty comparing the different route options. But here, as a substitute, we use directory listings. So there are phone books that had every address, and they said, who lived there or what business was there. And so you can see J Street, which was the one that was ultimately chosen, had much more commercial than either C Street to the north or O Street to the south in terms of these directory listings. And then um, we did some name matching as well, and you can see that O Street, which would have been in the south of Colton, they did successfully fight it off, though more for cost reasons than organizing. Would have been heavily Latino, J Street a mix, and C Street would have been heavily white. So they chose the one in the middle.
Thank you. So in terms of the legacies that the freeway has had, again, this is somewhat of a unique case study in that freeway construction of this time typically was the most destructive route, or the most destructive routes were typically chosen through Black and Brown communities of this time. So really, one of the unique takeaways that Colton offers here is that freeways can have impacts beyond just immediate and direct displacement. So Colton today is one of the most pollution burdened areas in California, and the physical and socioeconomic barriers that the freeway exacerbated that were started by the railroad have only continued. So even more recently, in 2011, this flyover was created to elevate one of the railroad tracks above the other. And so, this wall of transportation infrastructure only continues to be built out and divide the city. So we end here with a memoriam for one of the community researchers who was involved, which again is something we wanted to highlight here was how multifaceted and community involved this research project was. Another thing that we wanted to highlight with the story map is that it really worked alongside policy briefs as well, to make sure that this research and findings was presented in a really accessible way for the broader public and decision makers and policy makers as well. So the story maps and policy briefs really complement the research report, which you can find linked to at the bottom here. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jacob and Jordan. Fascinating presentation. So again, ask questions in the chat if you would like to. But we have for our session our last speaker, Alicia. So go ahead and share your screen and take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. I want to show you how I use mapping to document multilingual signage in public spaces in San Diego with both my students and the community. And first, I will go through the methodology that we use to document the landscapes in public spaces, and then two projects, a class project where my students documented the Spanish language signage in San Diego, and then a university-wide celebration where we involved the community and UCSD students, faculty, and staff to document the multilingual signage in San Diego. So what are linguistic landscapes? Linguistic landscape is a methodology that is used to document the visual language used in signage that surrounds us in the public space. It could be billboards, storefronts, flyers, banners, art. And the use of language in those spaces tells us a lot about linguistic policies and how they're implemented, the relative power of minority languages, the function of language in society, and it also uncovers ideologies that we may have about languages. And I also wanted to share the diversity of our multilingual state, where 44% of the population speaks a language other than English. This graph reports the most commonly spoken languages besides English in households. And Spanish happens to be the most commonly spoken language by 28% of households. This doesn't really represent how some households may be multilingual, but it gives us an idea of the languages that are spoken. This diversity in California is also represented in San Diego and very similarly. So the first project I want to talk about is the project that I put in place in my Spanish sociolinguistics class, where I had the students document the signs around San Diego where Spanish was represented. So students had to take pictures of signs in different neighborhoods, and the signs could be found in restaurants, in stores, in flyers that were posted, in public transportation or ads, or also in government spaces like libraries or DMV office. They had to upload the pictures into a survey and then classify each picture by language or languages that were represented, the language dominance, the location, and type of sign. And then they had to turn in a reflection about what those signs indicated about the use of Spanish in the community and whether this use reflected the surrounding linguistic soundscape, the languages they would hear in the area. And so this is the map that we came up with, and the map is searchable by both the location, language of the sign, the type of sign, and the dominance of the language, if a language is more heavily represented than the other. The dots represent the bilingual signs in red, the Spanish signs in blue, and multilingual signs in green. And the students were able to search the signage by type of sign, language used in the sign, by language dominance, by where the signs were located, and also by type of sign. Where the students at the end of the course, they had to do a research project, and some of them decided to use this data for the research projects. And the plan is to keep expanding this map for future iterations of this class. And now I'm going to talk about the celebration that we did university-wide. We have been celebrating International Mother Language Day for 5 years at UCSD. And we have kept involving the community in this celebration. The celebration is really to raise awareness about the importance of preserving the local languages and also learning languages. And this celebration was established by UNESCO. And here to the right, you can see the flyer that we used last year. And last year, what we did is to have a photo contest where people could contribute images of multilingual San Diego. And we encouraged high school students, where we did some reach out to high schools and UCSD community members and the community at large. And we had an in-person celebration at the library walk and a Zoom celebration. So in the photo contest, we asked people to upload pictures of the community and to describe those pictures. And the map was showcased during the in-person celebration. Some students presenting findings and observations about what they saw in the maps. You can see a picture there of some students. And then we had awards during the Zoom celebration. So this is the map that we came up with, and the map shows the pictures that were taken at by UC San Diego students, local area high schools and others, and the pictures that they took were displayed in the right. And here you have a picture in Japanese. You can find pictures by language. Here's a picture where Japanese was used, and the student reported the type of sign, which was a handwritten graffiti sign on the wall of UCSD Structural and Materials Engineering building, and then comments by the student and the languages that they identified in the image. In the Zoom celebration, we selected the images that we thought were better. We had a committee that decided the winners, and so this is one of the winning images that feature different languages, and the description of the image was done by the student, and this multilingual image was found in a restaurant in a wall. And this is another student that submitted a picture of herself by a sign featuring Bangla. And we also picked this picture because of the relevance for the celebration that was created after there were acts of violence against people for trying to keep their home language. And another winner was Natalia Marquez, that took a picture of a flyer that was posted in a poll in Spanish, and this flyer gave instructions about what to do if you encounter ICE agents. So the maps were shown in the in-person celebration in laptops, but then students also shared their findings in the in-person celebration. And we also had some mini research papers and proposals at the end of the class. What are the next steps? So the next steps is to continue expanding our maps, both the multilingual and Spanish language map, and continue involving our community and our students. And the idea is that when those maps are more complete and elaborate, that to have more research projects based on the maps, and where we can see these landscapes evolving over time with signage. And I want to give a special thanks to Amy Work at UC San Diego for helping me tremendously with this project, to Sharon Rose for putting me in touch with her, and for also working with her class on a multilingual project, and my students in 178 for the last couple of years for working with me. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Alicia, and thank you to all of our presenters. So let's give a real round of applause for all of our presenters, virtual or other. And I will ask that all of our presenters come back on camera. And so now we can have sort of an open Q&A session. So thank you. That was a wonderful range of topics. We'll see if there's any questions that have come in the Slack or in the chat. Or if anyone has a questions, feel free to raise your hand and we can call on you open. I have some questions, but I do want to open up the floor first. Okay, I'll start, and I'm just going to go in a random order. So Jacob and Jordan, have you looked at that across all of some of these different cities on the first map that you showed? There were several different cities selected. So are you looking at all of those cities? Have you done all of those cities? Of like, what's the long-term plan of looking at the impacts of freeways on communities?
So we've been doing this so through a series of projects. So we have, I believe, 6 story maps at that website. And each one kind of varies in the story we're trying to highlight. For instance, in San Diego, to piggyback off that presentation, there wasn't a choice between alternatives, but it was more a question of the freeway actually took 4 decades to build, and there was a pause in between. So looking at different eras. But yeah, I think at this point we're done with the work we planned to, and we have 6 plus 2 from UC Davis that looked in Northern California.
Thanks. That does make me think of there is actually a freeway, sort of like the same thing, right? Freeways all over everywhere have had impacts on communities. And there's actually one in I-81 in Syracuse, New York, that is actually being taken down. And so I think, right, like knowing the implications on the community, and I think it'll be interesting and fascinating to see like what change, like we already know that there's a divide, but what will happen in the future as you remove something that caused such a division. So
Yeah, and I'll just say in San Diego, there's also Peralta Park, which is the first CAP park. It's above the freeway. It's not all organizers wanted, but now those are being proposed in Hollywood, the Bay Area. I'm excited for them. There's a few examples across the country in Dallas that look pretty nice,
yeah.
and so we'll see where
I
that
think
goes.
Boston as well had one way back when. Wonderful. And I see, Jordan, you posted a link to the freeway siting project, so thank you. And yes, I think your freeway, like your story map that you shared, is in our virtual gallery. So feel free, as I think Maggie posted earlier, there's the virtual gallery link, so you can feel free to explore that throughout your time. So I'm gonna, okay, I'll go again. So Malia, in yours, right? So like the total fatality of landslides. This is a new database, like a new database that you are creating. And so you had mentioned you have access in Spain or to one that is previous. Are you hoping to do that in all of the countries, or are you starting with the US, or how do you sort of take and work at getting that data then prior to the internet? Like, what do you have a plan?
Yeah, so there's like a list of all of these databases, and some of them are just they're not accessible
Mm.
in general, and some of them are, and then those all were went through. Um, but then a lot of countries just don't take this information down. So like Spain was a pretty rare case where we had that accessible, unfortunately.
No, that's interesting. And I think in a earlier talk yesterday, and maybe it was sort of in this, there was another UCSD colleague who presented sort of like the impacts of the width of the beach and the height, sort of in the implications on sort of coastal erosion, not necessarily landslides, but right, like those implications. And uh, maybe you're in the same, maybe you're aware of one another.
Probably there a lot of that is in conjunction, and if like there's a smaller beach, then it's way more likely to have wave action on those cliffs, and they
Yeah.
don't fall.
I mean, and the other thing that made me think about, right, because you were talking about the human implications of, right, tourism and GDP, and it makes me think about the population that is close to those areas of like, is there variation in the total population living there, right? Like tourism and GDP, but it's also the accessibility of a beach to the human population and sort of being another factor, but interesting.
True. Good to keep in mind.
So I do see another question in the chat for Alicia. Can you talk more about the local San Diego community response to this project, particularly in today's current climbing? I'm thinking about the Know Your Rights poster you mentioned that was torn down. Sorry, climate, not climbing. So I am.
Yeah, so we well, people took pictures, right, of what they found in other languages. So basically, they're documenting what's going on right now. And what was controversial was to during the award session, right? What are the pictures that we picked as winners, right? And some people didn't want that picture to be the winning picture. So um, yeah, I think it's good to document all of this, and the maps allow us to keep screenshot of what's happening in our neighborhoods right now. But yeah, the controversy was more in the committee and the decisions that we had to make.
Thank you. Azure, a question for you in thinking about, right, the warehouses and the landscape, and I think fascinating, combining all of those and seeing sort of as the warehouse in 2018, sort of the slowdown of that. I'm curious if you've also started to look or like how does sort of like the other environmental factors around, so right, the mountains or other environmental sort of topography or the terrain have an implication in some of this. And I'm thinking specifically, right, like we know that that's the study area, um, but like general wind patterns as well, and knowing that, I don't know, I'm just curious if that it is all in any of the research as well, or just a side table for a future research project.
Yes, the considerations for the impact of topography and how a lot of the Los Angeles emissions are funneled through those mountains into the area of interest, which is the Inland Empire. That is the primary reason of looking at NO2, as it would be a little bit more reflective of the primary emissions from that anthropogenic activity with a short enough lifespan to reflect the local activity, as opposed to particulate matter that might have like a less association with local sources. There was more land use variables considered within the model than I discussed. So even ice that exists in Big Bear was like incorporated into the model to inform the section that was zoomed in on, and such. In regards to wind, I didn't have high enough spatial like resolution data that would complement the other variables in order to incorporate that. But in regards to meteorology, solar radiation, and maximum temperature that was included, as well as this was a summer model, so the air is more stagnant at that time. These were considerations that were taken in for the meteorological components, but in the winter model, especially consider like Santa Ana's and all that, I would like to do that in the future years.
No, that's wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, that's fascinating. So it looks like we're at time. And Janie and Leo, I had a question for you, but I know I can ask you as a follow-up, so I will follow up outside of this. But thank you all to our presenters today. Another round of applause. I think phenomenal topics and sort of just seeing the use of GIS. Our next session is actually at 11. It's happening right now.